At their peak during World War II, the Y services had about 17,000 personnel worldwide. As well as providing enciphered enemy traffic for work at Bletchley Park, the Y services were also able to generate intelligence in their own right, and one of the ways of doing that is through what's known as direction finding. If you take a bearing on the transmitter of a particular enemy message from several points, you can work out the location of that transmitter by triangulation. And that allows you to make certain deductions about the location of enemy units, the location of bases, ships at sea in particular, which can be of vital importance.
Late 1942 or early 1943, when we were losing a lot of ships in the Atlantic, and all the others were listening out on the U-boat frequencies. U-boats obviously very rarely came up. If one did come up, immediately the person receiving it would shout out the frequency. Everybody had to practically not breathe while they listened to it. And there was a man in the center of the room who had a desk connected to all the direction finding stations to try and get a fix on where this U-boat was.
All the direction finding sites were connected to the main Y stations by telephone. Now, when the main station picked up a signal that they wanted a bearing on, they would pipe it through to the DF station, and it would come out of one earpiece of the operator. The other earpiece would be the signal from their own radio receiver. So they'd, as quickly as possible, tune their radio to the correct frequency and try and match up the two transmissions that they're hearing in each ear. When they'd done that, they would rotate the aerials attached to their radio station so they're pointing in the opposite direction from the source of the transmission. This was the most reliable way to work out the bearing there. So they turn their radio antennas until the signal faded away and take a bearing on that point. And if possible, if time allowed, they'd take several bearings and take an average.
When a submarine needed to send a message, it comes up as a little squeak, so quiet, not a good old clonk on the thing, but somebody would just press their buzzer, you see. So you really had to listen, and you would scream out your frequency, 8290 B-bar. And so all the direction finders in the country, like searchlights, got together on that one and pinpointed it and hoped that they would get it. I mean, we never knew, of course.
The experience of work at a direction finding station was rather different than it was at one of the busy main intercept stations. These DF stations are normally a hut in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere, as far from civilization or anything that could cause radio interference as possible. And they only have a very small crew of maybe 5 or 6 personnel. So they work as a curious mix of boredom and extreme excitement. The operators would spend long hours on duty with very little happening, and then be called to action at very short notice. Quite often a direction finding cut would include a stove for the operator to keep warm and also make tea to get them through their shift. And sometimes there'd be a bed as well, so they could sleep during the night shift and be awoken by the telephone if they were called into action.
We had a direction-finding tower, which was a separate building from the main station. And when you were on duty in the tower, which was very cold and rather isolated, if they got a German ship up in the watchroom, they would phone you in the tower, tell you the frequency, and you would then rotate a circular direction-finding machine until you reach the point where the signal faded out, because it's easier to find where something fades out than where it's loudest. You'd then give them the direction back in the newsroom, and they would tell the intelligence centre, who would tell all the stations along the coast, and they would all try to get a fix on this signal.
With experienced operators, this whole process could be completed in as little as 20 seconds. And that information would then be fed back to the main Y stations. They plot out bearings from multiple direction finding sites and try and ascertain the source of a particular transmission. Direction finding was inevitably inaccurate. A discrepancy of just a fraction of a degree at the direction finding station could translate into inaccuracy of hundreds of miles when trying to locate a distant transmitter. But what they find is that the most important factor here is not the quality of the equipment which is being used, but actually the skill of the operator at the DS station. The personnel of the Y services were the most important factor, not just in the quality of interception, but also in the success of British signals intelligence as a whole, since without their work, Bletchley Park would have had no codes to break, the intelligence officers here would have had no intelligence to process.
You never knew quite what was coming next.
It's a lot of concentration listening to these things all the time and being sure you've got it right.
We never knew if it really helped to sink ships or anything else. We hoped it did.